exactly is the life of a network? Well, in this nugget, we'll examine exactly that. We'll take a look at the various phases that make up the life of a typical network. And we'll focus in on three of those phases, and we'll see how those phases are critical for us to understand and implement properly when we do a network design. So in this nugget, we'll start out by taking a look at something Cisco calls the PPDIOO life cycle. Boy, that acronym's a mouthful. And what this is going to literally lay out for us is all of the phases of the life of a typical network. And we'll see how it really is a cycle. It just keeps going around and around and around. We'll then go ahead and break out a particular design methodology that's based on these phases of a network's life. We're going to find that there's three critical steps when we follow the PPDIOO design methodology, and one of those important steps is to identify the customer's requirements. Now, remember, this customer might be your boss. So you might be designing a new network infrastructure for your employer. So customer doesn't always mean client in the traditional sense. The customer here could be whoever you're reporting to for this particular network design. What exactly is this PPDIOO life cycle concept from Cisco all about? Well, it's very common sense, so it's going to be very easy for you to memorize this from an exam perspective. First, we got to prepare to do the network design and eventual implementation. And as I've already alluded to, we're going to really identify what it is our customer needs out of their network, and that would be part of the prepare phase. What about the planning? Yeah, in the plan phase, we would literally figure out how much money we're going to need, how much staff we would need to pull this off, what kind of training that staff would need, and then we'd hit the D, the design phase. We'd actually go about designing this network infrastructure. We'll then implement the network. Then we'll stick around and operate the network. Inevitably, we'll discover issues with network performance or efficiencies or reliabilities or availabilities, and we'll have to optimize the network. And notice it starts all over again. So this truly is a cycle that the network's life goes through. Now, in the CCDA, what are our concerns? Well, our concerns are obviously going to be the prepare phase, the plan phase, and the design phase. Sure, we have the luxury of doing those phases and then handing them off to the engineers that are going to implement and operate and optimize this network's life cycle. So our focus in design work is preparing and planning and designing. And we want to do that very, very well. And that's going to have an obvious advantageous impact for our implementers. Yeah, they're really going to be excited if we do all our work well. Now, I know someone watching this video right now says, Anthony, boy, it'd be nice to hand off the design to someone. In my organization, I'm responsible for all of this life cycle. Well, just look at it this way. If you do the preparing and the planning and the design work great, your life's going to be easier then when you implement, operate, and optimize. Now, it sure was nice of Cisco to lay out this life cycle model for us, to really spell it out, to give us phases that we can really focus on and think about when we are enjoying taking a network through its various phases of life. From a design perspective, Cisco gives us literally a design methodology that ties into these phases. They say, look, in the prepare phase, we want you to really work hard to identify the requirements of the customer. And I'm going to give you some guidance on this, of course, in this nugget. Now, in subsequent nuggets, we'll focus on the additional design methodologies of the PPDIOO. For instance, in the planning phases, we want to make sure we carefully characterize the existing network of the customer. Sure, we want to make sure that we understand what issues they're having now. We want to understand how our design can integrate with the existing design, what potential pitfalls there may be, etc. And then, obviously, in the design phase, we're actually going to do the design, right? Yeah, in the design phase, it's actually time to go in and get the design work done. So there's our three phases, the P, and the D, the prepare, the plan, and the design. And here we can see the specifics that we'll go about doing in those particular phases. When you go to identify your customer's requirements, get your pen and paper, get your electronic note-taking device handy, because you want to heavily document what it is your customer thinks that they require. Here's some great information, and I'll give you tips on gathering all this, but we definitely want to think about what network applications and services they think they want. So we're going to really interview them on what are the apps and what are the services for the network infrastructure that they think they need. Then let's make sure we get from them their organizational goals. And also, let's find out their organizational constraints. So, what do they really want to achieve with their organization? And what do they view as the barriers to them achieving those particular goals? And then, guess what? We're going to do that same thing, but with technical. So, we're going to really interview them about their technical goals, and we're going to really interview them about whatever technical constraints they might have. As we get better at this, we're going to be able to literally guide the customer through certain decision points, because you'll start talking to them about, hey, what are your technical goals? And they'll kind of scratch their head, or maybe you'll even bring up their technical constraints and they won't be able to really verbalize what's holding their organization back. But as you provide them with illustrations and examples of what could be these constraints, both in their organization and technically, oftentimes you can be somewhat heroic to them, right? Because they realize, oh my goodness, I haven't even thought about some of these things. And you getting me to think about them is already providing a great service to our organization. So this can be a very valuable phase. Valuable for you because, let's face it, you are going a long way in what? You are preparing the network lifecycle here in this phase, and you can really make an excellent design based on identification of customer requirements, and it's rewarding for them because perhaps they haven't thought about many of these things in a long time, and they most definitely will not have them documented, and you're going to provide them with a rich set of documentation on this. So part of our identifying these requirements is to make sure we clearly document the planned applications and services. Build a very detailed table of this information. Look at for applications, for example. We can get the overall application type, like the categories database. We find out they desperately want Microsoft SQL Server. They have rated this of critical importance, and this is going to be storing the company's financial data as well as functioning as the Microsoft SharePoint storage system. And we go on and on through all of the various applications, documenting them up this way. Now, when it comes to the planned services, that'll be a much simpler table, right? Probably something along the lines of, okay, you folks want QoS Why do you want QoS? So we'll have one column for the service most likely, and then one column of comments. They want QoS because they're concerned about voice over IP bottlenecks, for instance, in the network infrastructure. So really, really do great diligence and great care on finding out what applications and services the customer is interested in, and then ensuring to carefully document all of this information. Err on the side of obtaining too much information as opposed to too little. Now, this next area I'm so passionate about, as I've alluded to already in these preliminary nuggets in the series. You gotta find out what the goals of the organization are. If your network is to be this raved about success through all levels of the organization, then that network has to help the company meet its organizational goals. Again, allow the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, allow management to really unload on you in this category. Just have them free think about what their organizational goals are. Maybe the CFO tells you it's to reduce overall costs in this organization. Maybe you're told that from the CEO, maybe you're told that we just dramatically have to improve our customer service. Maybe the operations person says we just have to collaborate better. So you're going to really, really allow them to just unload on their desires for the organization. And you're going to be frantically note taking, and your wheels are going to be turning in your brain because you're going to be thinking about how you can apply technology to solve many of these organizational goals. Now, right when your customer was just having a joyous time describing all the wonderful goals they have for their organization, you have to shatter their dreams. No, we don't shatter their dreams, but we do make sure we thoroughly document the inevitable organizational constraints that they're going to run up against as they are trying to build this amazing goal achieving organization. It's no surprise that there are four major typical categories. The budget. I know, boring. Yep, the budget is going to get in the way. Time constraints are inevitably going to get in the way. Staffing concerns are going to be a problem. Oh, sure, Anthony, you want us to design this amazing voice over IP network, but we don't have any voice over IP engineers on staff. And particular company or governmental policies can often get in the way. I mean, you could have these great ideas for opening up the sharing and collaboration of data, but this may hit head on particular security policies that are ingrained in the organization. So, just as important as documenting all those great organizational goals is documenting up those things that will impede the simple achievement of those goals. And that brings us to the final phase of this identifying customer requirements section. And here we talk about the obvious. What are the technical goals of the organization and what are the constraints? And typically there's not a lot of surprises here either. You're going to hear things like the network performance has to be addressed. And what are some constraints? Well, money. I mean, we'd love to go and buy the highest end Cisco routers and switches, and we'd love to provide amazing levels of bandwidth. By the way, bandwidth would be on the constraint side of the equation, wouldn't it? But oftentimes, the organizations are unable to do that. They'll talk about things like availability. Yes, we want that 5 nines of availability. We want our equipment to be 99.999% up throughout the year. But again, we run into budgetary constraints every time we try and provide that level of availability. Maybe they're worried about the security of the network. So one of their goals is to really enhance security in a borderless BYOD type of environment. So we will clearly get their technical goals documented, and then we will find out what are their biggest concerns from a constraint perspective. I would say three of the biggest areas of concerns that I run into are bandwidth, money, and compatibility. That's another huge constraint we see in the technical area. We are trying to implement new technologies and services for the organization, but it's going to cause tremendous compatibility issues with existing equipment and even sometimes existing security and QoS policies. So in this nugget, we took a look at the life cycle of a network. That's right. What are the phases that a network goes through? We also took a look at how we can take the prepare, plan, design, implement, operate, and optimize life cycle, and we can pull out of this a nice three-phased design methodology. And then in this nugget, we identified the first phase. In the prepare phase, we discussed how we can really efficiently get from a customer their requirements around the area of organizational goals, technical goals, and of course, their dreams for the particular network applications and services that they desire in their organization. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.